Frankie,
Ian, you son of a bitch.
how you doing, buddy?
I'm great. How are
Looking
you?
good this morning. Got the Cava Worldwide t-shirt on.
Oh, yeah.
Looking good, man.
Collared shirt, buddy. Collared shirt.
You haven't rebranded lately, have you? To Cava International?
This will be it for a while.
Keeping the brand. For those that don't know Frank, he rebrands every 4 months. Every 4 months he gets bored with his logo and his name and he just switches around. The only thing consistent is Cava. It's always in there.
I'm very creative.
Very creative. So today, Frankie, we are going to share things that we should have said more when we were starting off as new managers. And this is based, partly we're doing this podcast. I posted something, a short post on LinkedIn that got a ton of engagement, a lot of comments, a lot of strong opinions on different portions of it. So I thought it was good for us to go back and rehash some of these 10 things that we should have said more of, and really try to talk about when we weren't saying these things, what was psychologically, what was going on in our minds of why we were hesitant to say them. Make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So the first one on my list, and I don't think this will be unique to any new manager. I think just about every new manager struggles with this, is some version of I don't know, or I'm not sure. Let me go find out from somebody else. So as a new manager, I was terrified that someone was going to ask me a question that I didn't know the answer to. And especially around things like product or customers or how to approach a situation, a sale, things that were technical. I felt like I sold business to business, so I sold engineered products. I was scared to death someone was going to ask me some technical question. I was going to just stare at them blankly. And the reason why I was scared is I felt like they would think, first off, I was only 25 years old when I was first promoted, so I was very young to be a manager. And everyone who reported to me for the first 10 years of my life seemed like they were older than me. So I always felt like, maybe it's some of that imposter syndrome, but I just always felt like I should know the answers, and they're going to find out I'm a fraud and I don't belong in this job. They're going to think I got this job because I was friends with someone or because of charisma, not because of competence. That was what was behind me never wanting to say, I don't know.
So someone you know very well told me that one of my strengths was I would always tell you if I didn't know something, I'd always ask questions. So let's go to the genesis of the problem, right? You just said it. When you first get promoted, you're absolutely scared shitless and you don't know if you belong there anyways. Like somebody else believes in you and you're not sure if you believe in yourself enough to have that job. And you know that a couple of screw ups, you could have that last job back. So you're kind of scared, right? And you're kind of toggling this line. You also think, because you're young and you're scared and you're not thinking properly, that you need to know everything. So you're always just petrified of, I got to be the authority. You got promoted. You didn't get knighted. It didn't change that much. Like one little thing happened to you. You did now go from doing to managing other people that do. It's this thing that we think we put this pressure on ourselves of I must know all. It's a bad expectation, and it's something you can only disappoint on. So when you put me down with I don't know, I did used to use I don't know, but I was still scared to say it, and I was always scared that they thought I was a fraud. I mean, Ian, I'm 45 years old. I run a successful business. There's sometimes I still wake up and I'm like, do people think I'm a fraud? Like, that ain't going away. So if you've been promoted for 2 weeks or 20 years, it's just part of the process. So you have to kind of understand that. Now, let's talk about where you should say you don't know and where you shouldn't. And this is my opinion. I believe that being vulnerable is okay, but you can't be vulnerable all the time. And you can't be vulnerable publicly all the time because you're never going to build credibility with the masses. Now, you can't overreact and become that asshole that just because you got promoted, now you know everything and everyone thinks you're a jerk. Like, that's too far. But you've talked about in some of your articles and things we've talked about, you've had champions that you worked with. I had people that I knew I could walk in, close the door on, and say, I don't know how to do this. I'm nervous. This is my gut. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And these people were usually 10-year managers, 15-year managers, 20-year managers, or they were the guys in the field who were the stalwarts. They were the guys who they were never going to be your competition in the management office because they were just long-term in that job. But if you can champion them and you can talk to them and you can say, hey, look, you know me. I don't know this. Like, what are your thoughts? How would you like this? How would you like to be managed? What do you think the group would like to hear? Then you can kind of position things and you have people in the room who are going to support you because they feel embedded and they feel empowered.
I love something that you're bringing up here. So if you're a manager of a new manager, right? If you've just promoted someone into a management position. So what you just said is very important. So, you promoted Angelo, right? You put him into a job, you made him a manager, he started in sales. Knowing how you felt as a new leader, knowing how you were hesitant to say, I don't know, knowing that you had people you could go to and talk to is such an advantage for you. And it would be such a wasted opportunity if you didn't talk to Angelo right away and say, look, you're going to be nervous about saying, I don't know. You're going to think you should know all the answers. Let's just get that off the table. I know that you don't know much, because I still don't know much. So let's get that off the table. You won't be effective for me as a manager if you take this approach of you have to guess all the time. Come ask me. What are some things that you're nervous about that people are going to ask you that you're not going to know the answer to? Let's just get them all on the table right now and let's talk about it, right? Try to if you know that they're nervous about it, get that elephant in the room just out and visible and let's talk about it. Now it's not as scary anymore. Now it's, hey, I think leaders of new managers in general can do a better job of this, of letting people know all of their insecurities when they were a new manager. Because a lot of times when you're a new manager, I know I looked at my managers like they were gods, like they were bred to be leaders. And I wasn't, because they made things look natural. My first manager, when I got promoted, had been a manager for 15 years at GE. He was polished. He was a good executive. He knew what he was doing. And that's what I saw. So I'm like, man, that guy's just always been a good leader, so I'm not there. When the truth is, he was probably as big a wreck as I was in his first year trying to do it.
The Facebook and the Instagram culture makes you think just because someone looks good in a bikini and they get a great angle that they live a great life. And it's not the way it works.
The angle matters. The angle does matter, Frank.
I look way better from the blimp if you're
you want to get that high angle. That high angle, definitely.
My best side is from the moon. But
you can't see my second chin when you go up really high with the
But the point is like the duck floats, but there's a lot of work being done under the surface with those legs, right? And that's what it is. So I think more people who are just promoted are going to be listening to us than people who've been promoted a long time that have to have those people in the room. So one of the things you can think about is this. Let's just say you're interviewing. You're in an interview and you're working with someone in that interview who might ultimately be someone who's above you. This is when you should be humble in an interview. Say, look, I've really enjoyed this interview with you. Is it okay if I come to you from time to time when I'm in this new role, assuming I get it, and I ask you questions? Would it be okay if, I won't bother you, but from time to time, if I have stumbling blocks, question, you've been in the shoes I've been in, would it be okay if I was to come to you? That will play so incredibly well when your managers are making decisions about if you should be promoted or not. They know you're scared shitless. They've been in your shoes. They know you don't know everything because they were just managing you a couple of weeks ago. You're the best of the worst options. Think about a presidential election. You're the best of the worst options to get promoted. You might make it, you might not. They know that. But if you have that mentality of, will you be my champion? Can I ask you questions? Will you help me as a confidant? That shows humility, and it shows someone who knows the rope that you're about to take, that you're willing to listen and learn. That is what managerial quality candidates are. And that's how you get further faster.
I love that. And 100% agree with that. When you're in the interview, if you are going for that promotion, it's your first time leading people. Look, don't try to make it seem like you have. They know, like the person interviewing you knows you're going for a first time management job. They want to see your humility. They want to see, do you know it? Do you think you're better than you are? Can you be honest with me right now and say, you don't have many answers and you're going to have to figure this out on the fly and you're going to need mentors? Because that just shows me emotional intelligence, that you're not trying to hide something.
We're about to go into a presidential election. What's our economy? 18 trillion? No one's prepared for that. They're up on the stage stumping, saying, I'm ready to do this. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
There's no preparation for that. And in any job you're doing, the humility of, I'm not sure what I don't know, and having people who will help you. The saying, it takes a village, it is absolutely true, especially in business. Ian and I have gotten very far in the corporate world and as solopreneurs, but we didn't do it alone. We have staffs, we have people that can help us. We have each other to talk to. In managerial, like we had mentors, we had people who we don't even talk to anymore, but were helpful in getting up the ladder. And you have people above you are the people to be the most humble to. And then with people who you are now managing, don't fake it. Like, be honest, have integrity. They're going to know that. Like, hey man, 3 weeks ago, I was sitting in your shoes. I don't know the answer to this, but what's important to you? What do you need? What aren't you getting? Okay, let me go find it. And then go do it. Like, if you tell your subordinate that you're going to do something, do it. Be respectful of the fact that you are now part of the process and you're a conduit. But if you do those things, that is what a successful manager is.
And we've skipped ahead to number 2 on my list. Number 2, that's a good segue into it. Number 2 on my list is, I need help. Something that a lot of new managers are reticent to bring up. And for me, I can tell you the emotional side of this, again, stemmed from me being young and inexperienced. And I was afraid that my manager might think they made a mistake in promoting me. So I wanted to keep as much of my team and my issues and my problems away from him as possible. I didn't want to be a burden to him. I didn't want him to feel like, I couldn't handle my small team of 12 people maybe that reported to me. And so I should have gone to him way more often. And what normally would happen is I would try to handle the problem and do a poor job of it, right? Do it wrong the first time, and the problem would grow. And I would try to put another Band-Aid on it. It would grow until it got so big I couldn't hide it anymore. And then when I did go tell him I need help, it was always the same answer. It was always, why didn't you come talk to me about this 3 weeks ago? This didn't need to get to this point, and every time I'd be like, well, I should have, and at some point he just kind of smirked at me and said, we got to quit having this conversation, bud. Like, when you have an issue, come talk to me. I know you're not good enough to fix everything. Come talk to me. That's my job, is to help you. Don't let things get so bad that you're forced to come tell me, right? So again, he did a good job at some point calling me out on a bad behavior, right? And saying, this is bad management behavior. You sheltering every negative thing from me until you have to, that's bad behavior, and that's going to get you out of this job. He did a good job of looking in the eyes and saying that. And he made it easy on me to say, okay, I'm going to start bringing more stuff to you. You've opened your door more. He started by saying my door's open, but still in the back of your head, you're like, I don't want him to think he made a bad move by hiring me. I want him to think that I can handle my stuff.
So let me ask you this. I agree with everything you just said. And we spent a lot of time on 1, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on 2, but I want to ask you a follow-up. So you get promoted for the first time or the second time. How soon after you get promoted do you then have a new manager reporting to you? Pretty soon.
2 years.
Right.
2 years.
So if you're listening to this podcast, you're most likely new-ish into management or into business, right? Don't forget what it felt like to be in that role. Like what Ian was talking about, screwing up. Now, this is where you go from being an average leader to an incredible leader. Imagine if Ian's boss didn't let him screw up for the first 6 months, but instead made it a point. Every 2 to 3 weeks, he just grabbed them, got a cup of coffee, and they sat down and goes, what's happening? That leader goes from being receptive to proactive, and that speeds it up. And I can tell you that Ian and I both knew we didn't know, and we were always very aggressive at being proactive. And you used Angelo as an example. Hey, this is the things that are going to come up. We're going to talk about it up front, but there's constant check-ins from me to that person. And that gives that person the ability to come to you when they feel vulnerable. And it speeds the process up. So you're not banging your head against the wall for 6 months like Ian had to. That's like VIP service on the other side of management.
You know, there's pros and cons to exactly what happened with me at GE, but Frank, I went from managing salespeople to managing district managers to managing region managers from the time I was 25 to 28. So I went from sales manager to region manager to general manager of sales of an entire sales team with 5 regional VPs reporting to me. This happened in 3 years. Now, that's really unusual, but what I can say is that there were pros and cons of that. One, I always had imposter syndrome because I was moving so fast. I was always like, Jesus, I hadn't even figured out the sales manager job. I'm a regional. And then like I've been a regional a year and I'm like, now I got regionals reporting to me. I don't even know if I was good at that job yet, because I had some quick hit success. But on the flip side, I love what you just said. I knew exactly how every manager reporting to me felt because I was so close to it. I was still feeling a lot of the same things. So I was very collaborative of, let's work through some things together because I'm still trying to figure things out. I couldn't have a big ego because things were moving so fast. I didn't know if I earned them or not.
One thing that's unique about Ian and me is both of our mothers are educators. Ian's mom was a teacher who became a principal, and my mother she never got past teacher. She was an incredible teacher. And we were both raised to always be humble. Now, if you get 3 or 4 drinks in us, we are not humble at all. But in a work setting, we're very humble and we know we don't know. We know we need help. And that comes from mothers who instilled in us that, these ethics. If you go in pounding your chest, you're going to fail. But if you go in with the humility of knowing you don't know, understanding you don't know, embracing it, not fighting it, and not being afraid to ask for help, you're going to acclimate quicker and you're going to move through it. And that feeling of maybe I'm a fraud, we've all felt it. We still feel it. Like that's part of it. That is, uncomfort is growth. Discomfort is growth. That's what that is. It's just discomfort. And I wake up sometimes, I'm like, think about all the things I have on my plate and I can't go back to bed. Like that's just part of life. Like you're in the big leagues now. You're gonna get fastballs right up by your face every now and again because you're in the big leagues. So you just have to be able to just decompress, slow down, and be humble enough to realize it.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say on that. You wrapped that up really nicely. So number 3 on my list is around delegating, which I can say unequivocally, every manager sucks at this when they first start. Would you agree? Have you ever seen a new manager who was amazing delegator right out of the gate?
No, because it comes back to I need help and I don't know. You don't want anyone to think those 2 things about you, so you just do it all.
So what you never say when you start as a manager, the question is, can you handle this for me? Can you handle this for me? That statement doesn't get used by new managers. And for me, Frankie, I don't know what yours was, but for me, it was back to, I want to show value. I want to show that I belong. I want to show that I'm in the right role, right? So if a customer called, I'd want to show everyone I'm great with customers. Look at this. I'm going to take this all the way to the finish line and show everyone how it worked, right? Or if a proposal was getting sideways, I would dig in and go do it all myself. And really, when I was a sales rep, that's what my job was. That's what I did. So I would always get involved in a lot of things. And to the point where I was breaking, I didn't have enough hours left in the day, but I wanted to show value to my team that I'm here for you. And one, I wanted to impress them that I knew what I was doing. I wanted them to know that I knew what I was doing, right? I wanted them to know that your boss can handle your job, can do those things. But it ended up taking me away from the things I should have spent my time on. But not saying, can you handle this for me? It's another sign of insecurity. It's another sign of insecurity why you don't delegate. And maybe another side of me too is I wanted to be liked. And I was already very well aware that my sales reps worked a lot of hours. And so another side of me felt, man, they're going to hate me if I delegate extra stuff to them, right? I'll just take it all on myself as some badge of honor of this will make them like me more if I take some things off their plate. But if you go take 5 things off of all 12 people who work for you every week, you're not being a manager. You end up doing 60 things for them and none for yourself. And it was just an ineffective process for me. And it was a skewed way of thinking.
And I'm not a dictator. I never have been. What I always like to do is I like to go on their turf. So let's just say you're a new manager and you're managing a salesperson and they have a remote office or they have a desk somewhere or, they conduct their business from a coffee shop, whatever. Get on their turf and talk to them and ask them, hey, as a new manager, my goal is to see you succeed. What does success look like for you? Great. What are the things that I can help you with? Awesome. What you've had a manager like me in the past, what are some of the things you can take off my plate so I can be most effective at doing the high level stuff and you can do your job the best? Let's have that discussion. Let's have that back and forth. Let's understand it. And by doing these little stupid ass things, it adds up. Like your people are loyal to you. They realize you're a human. You got their best interests at heart. They see it. And they don't, I can delegate to nearly anybody here, almost anything, and they want to do it. Now let's talk about you've been promoted once or twice, and you got the Angelo or the person who's underneath you who you delegate to, and you see them banging on their computer fixing it, going, no. You need to take that to so-and-so. That is not your job. I need you to get it done, but I don't say you have to do it and then get it to me. That is how a business works. That is where scale comes from. That is how you can take people and teach those lessons, and you have to. And if they don't feel comfortable asking someone, you need to help them. Like, okay, what don't you feel comfortable with? Don't go do it. What don't you feel comfortable with? Why shouldn't you ask? Does this person not have the right tools? But then you have a culture where people can help each other out, and that's how you get a ton of stuff done.
Frankie, delegating becomes more obvious because some of the same tasks that you were taking on when you were a frontline sales manager, first-time manager, sometimes accidentally fall on your desk when you're the owner, when you're a senior executive of a company. And so let's take the customer. Let's take a customer who gets into corporate and gets on the phone with you. And there were times, let's say when I was at NVR, there were times where a customer would get to me and I couldn't shake them. And sometimes I would just fall back into default, not thinking, and just take ownership with the customer. And I would almost become the salesperson all the way to the closing table. I'm talking about putting hours in during the week for 2 weeks at a time to get that person done, talking to underwriting, calling the customer back. Some customer, I remember one time I'm trying to look at bank statements and they're sending me emails. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing? And the reason why it becomes more obvious is when you're a sales manager, you make about the same amount of money as a salesperson, right? Like usually a sales manager doesn't make much more than a good rep. When you're a manager of a sales manager, you make significantly more. And when I was looking at it, now I'm doing the job of a salesperson. So I had in between me a sales manager, a branch manager, a region manager, maybe there might've been 4 levels. And here I am, someone on any given year could make 7 figures. And I'm spending 2 weeks with one customer out of the 15,000 that we were going to close in that year. and I just wasted 2 weeks on it. And you stop and look back and you say, what the hell? I'm not even close to my pay grade. That, while I'm wasting this time, what could I have been doing that really is appropriate for how much this company pays me? And that stuff settles in. The higher up you go in an organization, you get more and more cognizant of your impact and the hours you spend that impact outcomes.
So let's use that scenario, right? Like you're a new manager, you dive in and you just do it. You deal with the customer, you do it. Sometimes you have to do that. But what are the ways to do it where it's not a complete waste?
I think the ways to do it, one, there's a couple of reasons why it's still valuable. One is you haven't been involved with a customer in a while and you're not exactly sure how the process goes, and you want to refamiliarize yourself with what your people are going through to help a customer get there. I see value in that. I see value in every once in a while swooping in,
I agree,
your sleeves and seeing how much has changed since I was doing this job. I see value in that because it gives you more empathy for the people who are working for you. I also see value in getting involved and moving yourself down to the CC line where the person who reports to you is back in control, but you're still watching and paying attention. So now you're working with that person, with the customer. So now I get a bird's eye view of how the employee who reports to me interacts with customers, how they handle things. And I can give some feedback along the way because they probably weren't doing something right if the customer got to me in the first place. So that's typically where I would get to is I'm going to talk to you as the customer. Thank you for bringing this to me. And then I would say, look, as a point of contact, I'm terrible, right? And I would be as blunt as I could. I'm in Cleveland tomorrow. I'm in Charlotte the next day and Florida the 2 days after. I'm in a boardroom half of my life. I'm not available. I'm an executive. I'm very hard to be a good point of contact with you. And I'm not as good at the technology as a loan officer. What I can promise you is you are going to have everyone's attention on my team. I do have the authority to put more resources on this. And you do now have my contact that if things are not moving better, you can always reach out back to me. But I'm going to ask if I can put you back in touch with your salesperson. And if they're so dug in that they don't want that salesperson anymore, then I can make a change of a salesperson. But I will ask them for their permission. Can I please give control back to someone who would service you much better than I will? Because if you think your service has been bad so far, try dealing with a senior executive as your point of contact. It will be bad. And I just share that with them. And as quickly as I can, I try to, reestablish a better point of contact than I am.
So that's perfect. And I think it goes a couple of ways. If you get to a senior leadership role and something that is rungs below you makes it to your desk, number one, there's a theme through this. Be humble. Okay, this is below me. I'm on a job site. I'm going to pick up cigarette butts and anything in the yard that makes the house not look great. My name's on the door, but that needs to be done, and I'm not afraid to do it. I'm not afraid to unload the dishwasher. But every now and again, I'm in there unloading the dishwasher, and somebody sees me and goes, go back to work. I'll handle this. You probably shouldn't be doing the dishwasher.
If you have the right team, that happens every time.
That's it. But every now and again,
they kick you out. Get out of here. I'm paid to do this, boss. You've got bigger things to go do.
And that's beautiful. But let's just say that thing rises up to a senior level. Ian handled it, and he handled it well. But there's two things he'll do. He'll do this expectation set with that employee, but then he'll also talk to his managers about, hey, this came up to me. It's okay, not a problem. I'm not pointing anybody out here. It flared up. I dealt with it. I work with so-and-so. Let me ask a couple of questions about it. And then right there, it becomes a training module for all the managers that are between him and the person in the field that he had to work with. And that puts everybody, not on blast, on notice. Hey, this made it to me. This is how you handle this so it doesn't make it to me next time. That's management. That's growth. The other thing you can do nowadays, which I do whenever I can, is if I'm into something that gets elevated to me, I put the people in the room with me they just sit back on mute. and we deal with it with them in the room. So if a project manager or a construction manager should be handling something, but it's made it to me, they're in the room with me, and then we go on mute real quick, and I'll be like, do you like where this is going? Are you okay with it? And we problem solve it together, but that way it doesn't rise up again, and I have to handle it all the time. It's teaching, it's coaching, it's real. It's like when you see a football game or a sporting event, coaches are constantly barking at players. And the reason for that is it's constant change, constant better, it's tweaking. We do that in business. Like, don't like wait 6 weeks to give the feedback. Do it in real time. That makes things so much better. And that's all part of it.
Love it. So you already started to get to this on number 3. And I think on my list, number 4, 7, and 8, I feel like they all go together, Frankie. So the three things that I'm talking about are, and Frank already brought this first one up, what is in your way? The second one is, how would you fix this? And the other one is, what changes should I make? So all 3 of these really show that you as a leader have a growth mindset and that you're curious. That, a lot of times a new manager, a number's not going the right way, performance isn't where you want it, and you fixate on the number. What's going on with your forecast? How come you keep missing forecasts? Why aren't we selling more? Why don't you have more leads? Why don't you have more appointments? And you get overly focused on metrics and measurements and numbers. And I think the questions that I just brought up are really show your curiosity. That's where a good manager gets paid. Our job as leaders is to find resistance and remove resistance. I kind of sound like Darth Vader right now. They're fighting the rebel scum, but that's what your job is. You think about resistance. What is in the way? If you're a sales manager and you're trying to sell, what's in the way of us selling? And I don't think you can ask that question too much. What's in our way? What's in our way? And not just ask it, but go do something about it. Go take some of that resistance away from them. That, to me, a great manager spends their time enabling their people to do what they do best. And whether that's internal bull crap that they're facing to do a better job, or it's competition, or it's product or process, to me, a good leader is always asking, what's in your way? How would you fix this if you were me? What changes should I make? Where should we be investing our time? And I personally looked at a manager and a team as just, let's go work harder to get everything done when I first started. And I asked some of these questions. I was curious. I didn't ask it nearly as much as I did 5 years later when I was more experienced. And I learned just how powerful it is when you ask those questions and go do something about it if you're building a culture and trying to energize a team to make them feel like they're heard.
So for the sake of time, this doesn't go 2 hours. I think what Ian said is great. Let me ask you a follow-up to this. How important is the individual, and how important is what you deliver to each individual? Does that make sense?
So sort of, but when you say how important is the individual, so every person is a little different on what they'll share with you. So if you, let's say you're taking over a new team and you have 10 people, Frank, from experience, if you ask, what would you fix around here? What's broken around here? What's in your way? There's going to be 2 people that just crap all over everything. And you're taking 6 pages of notes and you're like, wow, that was fast. And there's going to be 2 or 3 people that say nothing. And then in the middle, there's probably some that, they don't trust you yet. They don't know, is this a setup? Is this a fix? Why is he asking me this? What's his angle? What is he trying to do? People share information in layers, like peeling an onion. You won't get everything in the first time you go talk to them. So when you say the individual, some individuals are just geared towards giving feedback. And the louder people, the people that give you a ton early, Frank, are the ones that are probably thinking about leaving, or they're top performers that are just frustrated, that just need more from leadership. So if someone is all over me right out of the gate, I don't get offended. I'm not like, oh, this person's a whiner, this person's a complainer. My first thought is we're about to lose this person, because anyone who will just explode when you ask the question of what's in your way, and when you first ask it, is pretty much doesn't care if they're there anymore. Like they no longer have that bridge of let me just try to control myself. They're just sharing because they're like, well, this guy's my last shot. This guy's my last shot, so I might as well tell him how I feel and how I've been feeling for months. Might as well, someone's asking me, I might as well tell them how I feel. So you have to take them serious. But how important the individual is, I think everyone shares information at a different pace. And your job as a manager is to get everyone to share as much as humanly possible. So that means you have to keep going back and asking, just like you were peeling an onion.
And the thing I was driving at with this is there was a tool that someone at NVR gave me when I was a young manager, and it was called the strengths interview. And I can't find the damn thing to save my life, but I've looked for it a bunch of times. But
what was it?
It's called the strengths interview. I think Van Nostrand just ripped it off of a management book.
The book is Now Discover Your Strengths.
Yeah, and there was another one, Do Everything Different. There was a management book about throwaway.
It's Clifton. Clifton wrote the book. It's First Break All the Rules.
That's it.
Then he wrote a second book on the Strengths Finder and how to do a strengths interview.
So let's put that down in the notes and go over that at another point in time. But the strengths interview, to me, it breaks people down. It gets people to tell you a little bit about themselves. We do something different here. We do a get to know you, kind of a 20-question survey. And then every week once a week, everybody has to guess who that person is. But it tells you little things about people. And if a good manager can deliver a message, a great manager delivers the message that person needs to hear. And if you spend the time to get to know people, if you manage teams 600, 700, 800 people like Ian has, I've never managed a team that big. It's hard to get to know everybody. But the 12 or 15 real big decision makers or people that are in the middle there, Ian knew them very well. I know the people on my team very well who are the leaders and the decision makers, and I encourage them to do the same thing to get to know their staffs. And the reason for that is if you know somebody, you can kind of tell when they're telling you the truth and when they're not. You can tell when they're a little bit off kilter. You can tell these things, what's in your way, what do you need to fix it, what changes should we make. You can kind of tell in their disposition that something's wrong, and then you can dive into it and get to it. So getting to know the person is huge, and that's something you should really do as a new manager. And as you get to be a bigger manager, make sure your people are doing it and encourage that. And then asking those questions. And then, as Ian said, everybody's a little different with how they say it. And some people are going to be open book. Some people are going to be very much closed. You got to wedge it out of them somehow. But that's where great managers are made, is you can still manage the open book and the closed book very well because you know how to change your approach for that person. And that's critical. And you see it with good managers and average managers as you're kind of grown up. But when you learn how to do that, that's when the magic happens.
Love it. That's really well said. So numbers 5 and 6 are similar, but they're different. And these two are, I'm disappointed and I'm frustrated. So I'll start with I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed is when you move from talking about just the results or talking about what the company could do different to somebody's execution, based, compared to their peers with the same process, company, product, everything else. And I was slow on the uptake on this. And I would say I was probably like a Lamborghini versus most new managers that I've seen on being able to look someone in the eyes and say, I'm disappointed. And I wasn't terribly fast, but I see most new managers are terrified to make anything personal at all in performance. So they take everything on themselves. It's always a we conversation. What are we doing differently? They'll talk about we for 2 years when the truth is the manager's done everything they could. At some point, that person needs to go execute and get results. And, new managers struggle to make it about the person who reports to them. They always want to take that burden on themselves that this thing isn't working. And, if they wait too long and they wait too long with enough people who aren't performing and making it their manager is going to be having a you conversation and telling them that they're disappointed in them as a leader. So, I know I struggled because of just, it's uncomfortable. It's awkward. It's telling someone they're not good enough. It's telling someone their effort isn't working. And it's a deeply personal conversation.
Let me ask you this. I'm disappointed versus I'm frustrated. Which one would you express more often?
Frustrated, I did more often than disappointed. And frustrated to me was part of the reason why I didn't say frustrated enough, but why you could say it is frustrated is still admitting that it's admitting you don't have answers. Like, this isn't getting better and I'm not sure why. I know I'm supposed to have the answers as the manager. This is like a great roundtable discussion. You bring 10 people into a room with your whole team. You throw up a couple bar charts on the wall and say, team, someone needs to help me here because I'm frustrated. We've tried this, and this, and look at our performance. It is continuing to trend down. I'm frustrated. The translated, that means I don't have the answers. I'm flustered, and we're going to stay in this room until you guys, maybe this is a little bit closer to what's in your way, but it's a little bit deeper. It's a little more, this isn't just what's in your way. This is also execution. This is also productivity. This is also personal. We're not getting the job done. We're getting our asses kicked every week, even though our practices seem to be going pretty well. What's wrong?
Stated a different way, I'm frustrated can be systemic and it can be all kinds of different things. I'm disappointed is personal. Mm-hmm. So being disappointed with someone, if you take a new job and you're disappointed with everybody, that probably needs to be calibrated as frustration. Because I think it's a inexperienced manager who says, I'm just going to come in and fire everybody and start over. Like, that is not the answer if you've ever been a manager, because starting new, the grass is not greener. It's just new.
100%.
So I'm frustrated is a systemic problem that needs to be fixed by a group. Save the I'm disappointed for someone who lets you down, a child, someone that made a bad ethical decision. I'm disappointed. Now, if you come in day 3, you're disappointed in someone, they don't give a shit because they don't care about you. They don't know you. You're their new manager. Couple years in, you earn their trust, they let you down, that's where disappointment comes in. But what Ian is talking about in both of these instances is holding someone accountable and telling them that. Now, I've disappointed my managers. I know Ian's disappointed his from time to time. We fucked up. Let's go fix it. But being able to tell someone that they screwed up is something that a great manager does. And let's put yourself in the opposite role. Let's say you're still an employee who strives to become a manager. Say, hey, I'm disappointed in myself to your manager. I didn't do as well as I thought I could have done. And these are the reasons I screwed up. That is leadership potential right there. And that's it. But the difference between I'm frustrated and I'm disappointed are different. To me, disappointed is a personal thing, and you got to pick your choices, but you can't be afraid to voice it when the time is right.
Yeah. And I think, just to put a capper on those two, I think what I heard you say is I'm frustrated comes before I'm disappointed. You start with I'm frustrated. Let's kind of figure this out. And after a while, it goes to I'm disappointed. And that's usually more of an individual conversation. And that could be, if there's 10 employees and 8 are hitting their targets and 2 are way off. Well, we've done a lot of work around here to make things better, and it sure has worked for 80% of the team. Let's talk to these 2 because I've given you everything I've given everyone else, and we're still not there. And I've got to tell you, I'm disappointed in the results.
Correct.
It's an order.
And Frustration is something that happens in business, and it usually happens broader. Disappointing could be someone's performing well, but they do something dumb and boneheaded. That happens. But hey, you and I both agree that you probably shouldn't have said that in this meeting. Am I wrong? All right. Why'd you do it? I don't know. I wasn't thinking. Well, it was insensitive. Don't do that again. That really tears down the morale of the company and the group. And I look at you as a leader. That's the conversation. And then, are we done? Great. And then move on. But if it becomes one of those things you have to have the I'm disappointed conversation a lot with someone, they're the wrong fit. But everybody screws up. Get to it. Don't be afraid of it. Confront it. Make sure that person agrees with you. And then say, okay, we're done with this. You good? And move on. And that's it.
I love it. Number 9, I sense that you are feeling X. And for me, the reason why I wrote this one, there were many times in my first few years as a manager where I just got a gut feeling that something was off with a person. And I think, Frankie, I think all of this, when I look back at why I didn't, and then that person would leave, or, I would find out that person was mad at me from someone else, or something bad would happen and my gut would be right. And I think the reason why I didn't address it most of the time is I didn't have the confidence in my experience to trust my gut. I didn't have enough experience I would sense something, but I hadn't led people long enough to know what it was going to lead to. Whereas in maybe 10 years later, if I walked by someone in an office and they didn't make eye contact with me like they normally did, and they didn't have the smile they normally had on their face, the last 3 times I saw them, I would address it. I would just call it right out. Hey, Kara, what's going on? I sense you're not in the best mood. What, and just a quick question like that. I don't know about you. How many times have you just said, hey, what's going on, to someone and they start crying and you're like, whoa, like my gut was pretty close on that one. And they know by the way you said, hey, what's going on, that you can sense that things are not going well for them. And it could be personal. It could be frustration with the company. But I guess what I would leave someone who's listening to this, if your gut tells you something is off with someone, they're not acting like they normally are, they're not into it, they're not happy, they're frustrated in some way, trust your gut. Our guts are really good at sensing and picking up on differences of people. And I didn't trust my gut enough early in my career. And I lost some good people that I probably could have fixed by just saying, I sense that you are feeling pretty frustrated working here.
Yeah. I'm going to tell a funny story instead of going deeper into that. So when you're a new manager, you're playing to the audience. When you become a great manager, you play the audience. And I texted you this, Ian. There was a new station on XM. It was U2 radio, right? And Bono is interviewing Chris Rock. And Chris Rock, they were asking, like, what's the perfect stadium to play? And Bono's like 60,000. And Chris Rock goes, 3. And Bono goes, why? And he goes, the difference between you and me is you play to the audience and I can play the audience. To Chris Rock, the audience is an instrument. To a great manager, if you know your people and you did what we talked about, do a strengths interview, get to know them. You don't have to be buddies with them. They don't have to come over to Easter supper, but like, know them, understand what makes them tick, understand what's important to them, understand what pisses them off. Then you can play to them and you can ask those questions and they know you care. If you don't give a shit about somebody and someone goes, what's wrong? You're not going to go into it. Why? It's fucking worthless. They're not going to listen. They're going to turn it on something else. They're going to blow you off and they're going to get into something. But if you're invested in these people and they know you're invested in them and you see it and there's a concern and there's a problem and you ask, hey, I sense you're feeling off or something like that, like Ian said, that is where true relationships are built. That's how you can retain people that you might have turned. And that's how you can take someone who's average to incredible. That's how you can make a lifelong person on your team and your staff. Like those are the little things. One of the things I always say is the difference between good and great is measured in millimeters and not miles. It's the little tweaks that make all the difference. And when you're talking with people, that's a big deal.
I love it. I mean, process of iteration works with people just the same. And it's the last thing, that I think we agree on. Your gut can be a very powerful thing, and you got to trust it. You got to trust it. So the last one is the simplest. And I think this is no different for new managers. It is for people and anything in life, is just thank you. And I can say I didn't say it enough because I just didn't know how powerful it was. I didn't appreciate. I said it enough. I said thank you. I said I appreciate you. But I think I got so focused on the people that weren't performing well that I would go long stretches of ignoring people that were just doing extraordinary work because they were independent, because they were good at what they did, because they just were consistent. They were off my radar because they were great. And I'd spent all my time with those who were not great and didn't take the time to tell those people how much I appreciated that they ran their business as well as they did without my involvement. And I could have done, and I could say this over 20 years, I could have done a much better job of always saying thank you to the people that I appreciated, because they just tend to fall under your radar because the problems all bubble up to the surface.
So saying thank you is good, and it's something you should do a lot of. And I did a lot of it because I was raised to be a humble kid, and I never really thought anything that I did was all that special. So saying thank you is a big deal. And honestly, it's not something I struggle with as a manager. But if you are going to be a good manager, you must do through others. So they must know that you appreciate what they do. In addition to just a thank you, think about the gestures that have been done to you in your life that you think are powerful. Thank you is one of them, but what about a handwritten card? What about a text message? What about telling one of your colleagues that you did a great job? But don't tell you tell the colleague, and the colleague feeds it back to you. What about telling, once you get far enough up the chain and you've got a couple of managers below you, you notice that someone on the entry level did a great job, but instead of calling the person on the entry level, or even if you do both, you call the person on the entry level and you tell them great job, and then you write a handwritten note to their manager and just say, hey, just an FYI, so-and-so is doing a great job. I want you both to know that's also a great job for you. Think about the times you've gotten a note in your inbox or a text or something that just shows that you're being cared for. All of these little things, this is an analogy I use all the time. You're either adding or subtracting points constantly. That's kind of life. All of these little things, if you do them right, you're adding points. And you're putting points in your own basket as a manager. And it makes people think more favorably for you, want to work harder for you, loyalty to you, all these other things, because ultimately they know that you care about them, and it's a symbiotic relationship. And what Ian and I are talking about.
What's your favorite or most memorable appreciation that a manager ever gave you?
So someone who I work for, who who is a real pain in my ass, always breaking my balls. She would put little notes, like little thank yous or good jobs. And back then we had little cubes, and I'd walk in, I'd be going through all the garbage paperwork, and in there was a note. I'm like, that's awesome. Or I was in a meeting once, and my division manager had spoken to the CEO, and the CEO goes, oh, you're the guy who did that thing I heard about. I'm like, I was shocked, like absolutely shocked that my boss reported to the CEO. I mean, I wasn't even a manager. I was in the field, and he knew that. Like little things like that.
Yeah. And here 20 years later, you remember those little Post-it notes, those little, as successful as you are now, it's stuck with you that long. My favorite by far, I was asked by our general manager, who's a vice president at GE, I was asked to present at the annual meeting, young, maybe 23, 24, just before I got my first promotion. asked me to present on how to prospect, because I was one of the few salespeople. We had a lot of farmers that would go to the same accounts over and over, and they were good at it, but we didn't have many hunters, and they kind of brought me in to hunt. So he asked me if I would get up and do a 15-minute presentation on how I built an account package. No direction, nothing, just you got 15 minutes, I put you on the schedule, you're going to get in front of 200 people at our annual meeting, on the stage up there, build a PowerPoint or don't, just give a speech and impress people. I worked my ass off on that presentation. It was like one of my first big presentations I ever did. And I researched, I practiced it 1,000 times. I had jokes in it. I did the Ian thing. I put myself into it. And when I got done, I got a big ovation, and it felt really cool. And I walked by that vice president on the way to my seat, it was some Marriott somewhere. And, he kind of, he smiled at me. And about 3 minutes later into the next speech, he got up, walked back to where my seat was, and handed me a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper was a Marriott. I still have it, by the way. I still have this note. It was a Marriott pad of paper, and he had written on it, something to the effect of, Ian, that was absolutely incredible. I look forward to the day that you're my boss, Jim. That was it. And I just remember how good that made me feel, because this guy was an idol of mine. I absolutely loved him as a boss. He was a great mentor, but he took the time and he scribbled it right there. He didn't put a lot of time into it. He just was wowed by something I did, and he didn't wait a week. He gave it to me right there in writing so I could take it with me, and I kept it. I still have that thing. 20 years later, I still have that note, and I paid it forward. I always was writing little handwritten notes to people in the organization, because I knew that, some wouldn't care, some would, but some would save that note for 20 years. And because I know that I did. And so that always stuck with me.
So one of the things that I have, and I own my own business, I can expense all this shit, and I know some of you can't, but I always have card stock and an envelope with me wherever I go. And if something great happens, I put it on card stock. You've gotten a bunch of them, Ian.
Yeah.
You just write a little card and you put it on their chair, or you hand it to them, or you mail it to them. And as we get more and more tech heavy, as we're recording this during COVID, we can't touch each other. We can't see each other. We got to be distant. Little things like showing you care, that you took the time to write a 17-second card, it makes a difference. And I was talking about accumulating points. This is how you accumulate points with people. It's the good managers can get people to do things to help hit goals and achieve. It's the little stuff. If they know you give a shit about them, they will give a shit about you. And these are the little things. And there's not one perfect way to do this. It's just be conscious, know the people, understand what they need, give them what they need, be a great supporter. And once in a while they need a slap, once in a while they need a push, once in a while they need a pat on the back, whatever it is, just do that and do it in your own. This is the coolest thing about being a manager. You get to do it in your own unique way. You don't have to do it my way. You don't have to do it Ian's way. Do it your way. That's what's incredible, is be personable, be likable, be someone that people just want to work with and for. And that sets you apart.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think, thank you. You can't overuse it. You can't overdo appreciation. You can't, that's not one that anyone ever gets tired of hearing. You can't overuse it. You can overuse some of these on here, but for the most part, you can't overuse that one. But to me, if I'd have said these 10 things more frequently as a new manager, I would have been effective much faster than I was. And I think you would probably agree with that as well, Frankie.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, even listening to this, if you go and implement all this, you're still not going to be perfect. You're going to get there faster, but you got to just go through it, and you got to live it, and you got to learn it, and you got to go through it. But having humility, knowing you don't know everything, not putting too much extra pressure on yourself, and always being gracious and saying thanks is going to get you to a point of being a great manager a hell of a lot faster.
Totally. And hey, Frankie, I appreciate you, buddy.
Hey, Ian, thanks.
All right, brother. I'll see you later, man.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.